My name is Pat. I grew up in Langley on a dairy farm, and I learned a love of gardening from my parents because you spend a lot of time in the garden then. Because I love gardening, I have always had a vegetable garden, lots of flower beds, lots of experimenting with what works and what doesn't work. And so I found myself at Kwantlen University, and I took the horticulture course with the landscape design. After graduation, I started my own company, and I work mostly in residential. I love meeting the people and making big changes. The practice of ecological gardening includes design, building and maintenance of a landscape, and it takes into consideration the ecology of the site and what it takes to create a landscape that enhances the surrounding environment for our benefit and for other life in the ecosystem. That's looking at our people, the animals, the plants, the water, the soil, the insects, wildlife, and all of how it interacts together. We want to use organic materials for amending the soil and controlling pests and weeds, and conserving water by knowing our water resources and choosing water-wise plants and native plant material. Landscape is also much more than just gardens. It includes hardscape, driveways, patios, paths, all the stuff that does not let water permeate if we're not careful. So how are we allowing water to permeate and soak into the soil? What percentage of our space is covered with non-porous materials? It's really, really important to have a balance of growing space and practical walking and playing spaces. So to highlight some of the main principles of the ecological gardening, we want to use natural components for gardens instead of chemicals, like using compost to build good soils. And composting garden cleanup is an economical way also to build up your soil. We want to use good plants, native, appropriate plants for our zone and our climate, means that they require less pushing to do well. I often say the right plant in the right place will make you happy, but also the plants happy. We want plants to attract birds, bees, butterflies. A good variety of plants for 4 seasons of beauty and interest. And we also want to include trees for shade, for air quality, for protection of birds, and aesthetics. The third thing we want to remember is that water usage is really important. So choose water-wise plants that need less water to live well, and choose your method of watering. Around here we use a drip and a soaker hose method, and I hand water with a nozzle for gardens. Don't use a sprinkler system unless you absolutely need to, since most of it goes up into the air. The fourth thing is protecting your soil and your plants. Using mulch is a really, really good option. When they're mulched, weeding, watering, and maintenance needs go way down. And ground covers are highly important. Just choose your ground covers wisely. So how can we still maintain the aesthetic quality of a garden if we choose to go ecologically? Well, we live in one of the nicest areas of Canada for climate, and we can grow so many more plants in our Zone 8 than most of the rest of the country. We have a huge list of plants to have something stand out in each of our 4 seasons with texture, color, fruits, and flowers. It actually makes more sense and makes gardens easier when we're not fighting what grows best in our area. We can also consider the 3 layers. It's really important to have an understory. That's anything 3 feet and down or 1 meter. Small shrubs, ground covers, most of our perennials. Then there's the middle story, and you can interplant those, and those are your medium-sized shrubs. And then you have your upper story, trees. They have large canopies, you can plant underneath them, but all together they create the most pleasing garden ever, and you will have something to enjoy all year long. So, has our gardening practices changed over the last decade, or maybe even in the last few years? In my humble opinion, yes. A couple of things stand out for me. We are much more concerned about conserving water, which is a really good thing. In Langley, we go on water restrictions every single year, no matter whether the rivers are full or whether it's still raining or not. It's a very, very wise practice. You see, water is not unlimited, and we need to do what we can to treat it with respect. So there's a few ways we can do that. Watering methods, again, The dripper and the soaker hose is very important on our timers, and we can certainly let our lawns go gold. It doesn't hurt it at all. It all comes back. What about xeroscaping? That's a new word. I did not learn that for a while. It's a new practice for most of us, and one example of that is the dry riverbeds that we create quite often, and we don't need to have any water in it. The other option is water-wise plants. There's a great list of plants that do well without very little water, and they're beautiful. They're easy to care for, especially when it stops raining during the summer. There's a wonderful move back to native plants, and that simply does well because they belong here. Our passion for growing is way more than just lawns. That's the second item I've really noticed. People are going back to growing food gardens, perennials, shrubs, and trees with an eye of feeding ourselves, the birds, and the bees too. The third item I've noticed is going back to organic and natural products instead of using chemicals and harsh fertilizers. Our willingness to compost, to use sea salt and fish fertilizers, and how we explore to best leave a legacy of health in our environment is so important, and I'm so glad that we are turning our heads and our hands back to that attitude. So you must wonder, what's some of the common requirements of gardening that people ask me for? One of the things they ask most for is no maintenance. That's actually not going to happen. But we do create low maintenance gardening. It actually can happen when we choose the right plant for the right place. They also ask for things that are very practical and beautiful, easily done. And the newest way of talking about landscaping is landscaping outdoors are simply the extension of the home. We build outdoor dining rooms, play areas, and gathering areas, and much, much more.